with music, when you're in those turbulent years and you know that you need to be a part of some community, some communion, well, music offers you so many opportunities, so many avenues for you to enter. Whether you enter through the hard rock door, whether you enter through the rap door, whether you enter through the country door, once you enter those doors, you're no longer existing all alone.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Why Music Matters podcast. I'm your host, music journalist and musician Jeff Myers. Throughout my life in and around music, I've often asked myself the question, why does music matter? This podcast will attempt to answer that question with the help of musicians, members of the music industry, and music lovers like you. Today on Why Music Matters, my guest is Ray Wawrzyniak, a devout music lover, musicologist, author, and collector whose main passion in life, aside from his family of course, is the Canadian progressive rock trio Rush. Ray joined me to chat about our shared love for that band, about Rush co-founder Geddy Lee's new memoir, and about why all music matters, but in Ray's world, Rush music matters most. Well, welcome to Why Music Matters, my friend Ray Wawrzyniak. It's a pleasure to have you here. Educator.
Indeed.
Music aficionado, historian, author. And the sort of basis of our friendship, at least initially, Rush fanatic.
All the above, yes. I plead yes to all the above.
It's a pleasure to have you here. It's good to see you again. Ray and I have been friends for 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
We met due to our shared fandom for the Canadian trio Rush. And since then, we've done some cool events together, and we've had a lot of fun just talking about, in particular, that band's music, but also beyond that. And I thought you have a lot of insight into why music matters to others, but I'd like to start with why music matters to you and the impact that it's had on your life in general. Because for someone who isn't a musician, you are one of the most into it people I've ever met, where music is a part of your daily life.
Why music matters in general. Tell me that we booked approximately 4 or 5 hours just to answer that one question only.
We're going to be editing this, Joe.
Right. First of all, thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I'm always happy to be with you. I'm happy to be here and now, just two friends just talking music.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we do. It's why I did what I did early this morning with somebody. Just sat around a table and talked music for 2.5 hours. Why music matters. I want I love the premise of the podcast with that chosen title, Why Music Matters. And once you began this series, Why Music Matters, I was watching it out of friendship and allegiance to yourself, as a musicologist wanting to just continue to listen and learn. But ultimately, I got to the heart of it for me of why music matters. And not surprisingly to yourself, I came upon a quote from a lyricist that you and I know well that kind of started me thinking why music matters. So you know as well as I do, in 1987, on Rush's Hold Your Fire record, there's a song called Turn the Page. And within the lyrics of that song, Neil claims that nothing can survive in the vacuum.
Yeah.
No one can exist all alone. And I thought that was a good starting point for me. Not me X number of years ago when music altered the orbit of my life. But in thinking about today and thinking about why music matters, I started with that. Nothing can survive in a vacuum. No one can exist all alone. So here's a lot of young kids who are, just starting high school or in middle school. Those turbulent years where you're trying to find out who you are, where do I fit? And you're looking for that. You're looking for where do I fit? Because all of these kids, all of these people, you and I, we want to not only fit, we want to have that sense of not only community, but that sense of communion. I can't exist all alone.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're in my life. I need you in my life. I need all these loved ones and family and friends in my life. I can't survive in a vacuum. I can't exist all alone. I need to find that place of communion, of communion. I could have said of community, but I even like that. The idea that I need a place of communion, similar to the religious opportunities that are offered to people, that you can practice your religious faith with X number of religious denominations in order to find your faith. Similarly, with music, when you're in those turbulent years and you know that you need to be a part of some community, some communion, well, music offers you so many opportunities, so many avenues for you to enter, whether you enter through the hard rock door, whether you enter through the rap door, whether you enter through the country door. Once you enter those doors, you're no longer existing all alone. You've opened the door to this communion, to this community of others that does ultimately give you the same fulfillment that, I'm not saying the same fulfillment, a different sort of fulfillment than you might get otherwise. No one can exist all alone. So whether it's my relationship, whether it's our collective relationship with Rush that opened the doors for you and I to be here together, that was where it started for me, was the realization that no one can exist all alone. And if I can advance this thread.
Please.
There's times when growing up, of course, not just, with myself, with yourself, but when people are through those difficult adolescent years and all of a sudden you're rebelling against your parents and your parents have become, maybe not your arch enemy, but you're just not, you're butting heads with your parents. Well, that's always just kind of sat there. Well, in anticipation of today, I don't know why this line came to me, but I'm sure you're familiar with City Slickers, the great movie, with Billy Crystal and Daniel Stern.
That's a deep cut, Ray.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm gonna pull up a line of dialogue from that movie when Daniel Stern, Billy Crystal, and a young lady just sitting around a fire, and the girl just couldn't quite understand her ex-husband's passion for baseball and why he needed to have all these baseball cards and why he needed to talk baseball. And Daniel Stern said something to the effect of, he said, well, when I was young, he said, and I couldn't get along with my father, he said, we still had baseball to talk about.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes for our collective selves and music. That as soon as that door is open, where somebody enters the same musical door to the room in which I live my musical life, all of a sudden I have an immediate relationship with that person.
Yeah.
How's that for a start? Was that a good start?
It was a wonderful start. I love that you started with a quote from a lyric by Neil Peart from Turn the Page from the Hold Your Fire album. It didn't take us long to get to Rush. And, we are Rush dorks, and there is a large international community of people like you and I. I'm glad that you started by kind of pinpointing it to those somewhat turbulent years of adolescence, looking for community and finding communion with and through the music. It's exactly how it went for me. But I'm wondering, since you noted that, was being a bit of an outsider in the more, quote, conventional forms of communion. I'm not even sure if this is true of you. It was true for me. I found communion and community through music because I wasn't finding it elsewhere. And you as an educator, you're not a music educator, but I'm sure that your students, you see how music can provide this for them too. Was that part of it for you? Were you finding it because you weren't finding it elsewhere?
No, not necessarily. And by the way, you're correct. I'm not a music educator, but I am darn well taking some of these kids to musical church every now and then in my classroom.
That's right.
Nonetheless, no, was it, turbulent for myself as an adolescent? No, I, fit in well.
Yeah.
But whether music is there for you, there's a great quote from Jeff Woods. Jeff Woods, a great Canadian broadcaster. I've spent time with Jeff on a few occasions in few different Rush-related panels in which I was blessed to have been a part of, and Jeff moderated a couple different things. Jeff wrote a book, Radio, Records, and Rock Stars. And somewhere within the first X number of pages, Jeff wrote something to the effect of, music has long been our solace, as important to us in times of trouble as it has been in times of triumph. I say that as it relates to your question. I didn't necessarily lean on music during difficult or turbulent times or times of solace. Quite the opposite. It was always there for me in moments of triumph, or just in moments of celebration, or moments of communion or community and happiness with others. I think back in all these great periods growing up, and to me, I think of the soundtrack that was a part of each one of those shared great communal experiences. So I completely understand how music is there for those people who are still trying to find themselves.
Yeah.
Life is hard. I just finished recently reading Life's Great Lessons by Hal Urban. And within a lot of the education that Hal shares in that book is the simplicity of that. Life is hard.
Yeah.
Whether you're an adolescent trying to find yourself, or whether you're two guys like you and I just trying to fight through the daily grind sometimes.
Life is nasty, brutish, and too short.
Yes.
But
yes.
also beautiful.
Yes, and yes. So it's during those difficult times that music is there for us in our times of solace and in our times of triumph.
Yeah. Well said.
Mm-hmm. I'll give Jeff Woods the quote for that. Credit for that.
I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jeff Woods.
Yes.
For me, if we're gonna, let's get to Rush, because we kind of we did right away anyway. And I think the Rush initiates out there will understand, because they're a window into this broader world that we're discussing, and they certainly were for me. I had a particular situation as an adolescent where, not for any reason, I wasn't in trouble or anything like that, but I ended up going to a Catholic military high school in the Albany region, and I was very alienated and felt very, very much alone, and ended up having a healthy relationship with my parents, but I didn't then. And falling in love with this music and willfully entering the world that this music conjured gave me an awful lot because I felt so alienated. Obviously, a lot of Rush music dealt with this topic. I would say in particular the area between Permanent Waves and Power Window, say, or a little bit. So we're talking late 70s, early 80s. I think I found in Neil Peart a sort of father figure and an educator that I could respect at a time when I didn't really respect what I was dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And those, when you fall for something and it means that much to you, it almost transcends music, but music is the door into that world. I hope I'm not overstating this, but I wanted to say, it sounds like you were happy and well-adjusted in high school, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, indeed.
I wasn't, but it's funny how we came to the same place,
right.
through this.
Respect. You just said how much you respected Neil's work.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about that, because if I find that's a great seed.
I was raised around books,
Mm-hmm.
and my parents were not music freaks by any stretch of the imagination, but they had very good taste.
Mm-hmm.
So that I heard really good records young and grew up where there were books everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I was never discouraged from reading anything, whether I was ready to or not.
Mm-hmm.
So my love for music, I can't remember life before it.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of came concurrently with my reverence for the power of the written word.
Right.
And in Neil, I found those worlds combined. It had a massive effect on my life.
Right. Doesn't that say something? I'm so glad you brought this up. Doesn't that say something where here's a band, particularly here's a drummer, here's a lyricist. Here's a band that you've heard this from so many other people in the course of your life. Oh, this music inspired me.
Yeah.
Well, here's a band that inspired me to be more literate.
Yeah.
How many bands are inspiring greater literacy in their fans? And
it was unusual, to say the least.
Right? Yeah. There's other bands who are inspiring their fans in different ways, but to inspire somebody to be more well-read, to be more well-spoken, to be that much more literate. And where's this inspiration coming from? It's coming from this rock band.
Yeah.
Okay, that's something that my parents just couldn't understand. When I was 16, I'm in my bedroom with the door closed. My mom's, banging on the door. I love you, Mom. My mom's banging on the door. Here she is only now, all these years later, understanding that it was something greater than just, teenage rebellion.
Right.
That it was this point of inspiration. And isn't that another one of the reasons why music matters?
Yes.
Is that inspiration, that initial spark, whether it's music, whether it's literature, whether it's a movie, there's usually some theme, some lesson that's intended. And it's not just our job as the listener or the viewer or the reader to understand the lesson. It's to take that lesson and then carry it with us. So there's so many bands and artists, as you know, that are inspiring. In this case, this band, Rush, inspired me to be more literate, for crying out loud. But there's other bands who are inspiring their fans for greater activism and greater change to make the world a better place. Holy cow, our world needs continued love and attention.
To me, that is the ultimate act of rebellion. That's how I looked at it. Rock and roll in particular is always associated with rebellion, right? Mm-hmm. But to me, rebelling was like, well, okay, I'm not the cool guy. I'm not on the football team. I'm not dating all these girls in high school or anything like that. But I'm bettering myself through reading, through studying music, through, going into this world of my imagination, because I had role models in that area, and they were so much that to me. Well, in terms of the writing, reading, bettering yourself, but also teaching myself music, because I've always been a musician right along with it. Mm-hmm. They kind of checked every box in a way, That's why I think they're so worth discussing. Mm-hmm.
But you've paid, I'm sure along the way, you've paid a price for the success that you've enjoyed. I even like that quote, from the same album, different song. Yeah. We each pay a fabulous
for our vision of paradise.
For our vision, we each pay a fabulous price for our vision of paradise. And I respect your passion for music. I respect your passion for music, but I can notice and have respect for passion in general. Now, those three guys, Geddy, Alex, and Neil, were incredibly passionate.
Mm-hmm.
As Ged details in his book.
We'll get into that.
Sometimes his passion was at the expense of his family life, and holy cow, how difficult is that to balance? But I can notice and respect passion in others. I understand when somebody is hopping on a plane to go to some car show across the country because they're a car aficionado, or you're hopping on a plane to go to this part of the world because there's a new restaurant being open and you're into foods. So sometimes people couldn't quite understand me going to see Rush, 113 times, not counting their appearances outside of the context of the band.
Yes.
Ray, you were in Portland this weekend. Ray, you went to Albuquerque. Ray, you were in Colorado. And I found that the people who would question it, sadly, in my view, were people who just never really developed a passion.
Yeah.
I don't care what if your passion is skateboarding, if your passion is cars. I like tapping into other people's passions. Mine happens to be music because I was so inspired by this band at that seminal age of my life when I was on the basketball team and I was on the football team. But all of a sudden, music came and just completely altered the orbit of my life. I think I told you previously, when I was 15, 16, I wanted to be in the NBA. And it was only because I stopped growing that I'm not there. That's the only reason I'll say. I lost my train of thought there. You can edit that out, right?
Yeah, no. Losing the train of thought is always okay. While you were discussing that passion, whatever it may be, we're centered on music, but it's one of many possible avenues to the same place. Have you seen? Speaking of Geddy Lee, bassist, vocalist, keyboardist with Rush, author of My Effin' Life, his new memoir, which we've both read, and we've only talked about it a little. We will talk about it more. But concurrent with that is this new show on Paramount Plus. Geddy Lee seeks to answer the question, are bass players human?
Yes.
Wonderful series. Did you see it?
Yeah, I saw all 4 episodes.
I've watched them several times. But I was thinking while you were discussing that passion, the episode with Les Claypool from Primus,
right?
Another wonderful and wonderfully weird musician, great bass player. But Les made a comment in there that this is why these are the things that make you want to get out of bed in the morning, and face the day and own them and let them enrich your life. Music is certainly one of those things, right? And it's been a well that I just can return to daily for 50 years, something like that. And I wonder, throughout your life, I mean, you're an educator. How is music something that you rely on, in your day-to-day life? Even when, you're teaching class, you're not going to a concert. There are concerts every night. How is it something that you have made part of your everyday life?
That's a good question. How have I made it part of my life? Well, I heard what you said moments ago. Sometimes just putting your feet on the floor is difficult.
Yeah.
There are days where a person wakes up with whatever it is hanging over their head. And what makes them put their feet on the floor? Sometimes it is music. Well, look at our favorite drummer here.
Yeah.
He went through the worst tragedy I could ever have imagined.
What we're talking about is Neil Peart lost his 19-year-old daughter, and within a 6-month period of that, also lost his wife.
Yeah. So how did he ever find the strength to put his feet on the floor? And because of that, don't you feel, just because of that simple human empathy for another person's soul, how do you not listen to one little victory?
Yeah.
And just make that a part of your day, that when I'm having a difficult day under whatever circumstances professionally, sometimes I will look at something that I might do that's so simple, and I'll just kind of remind myself, that was one little victory.
Yeah.
That we have all these little victories in our life, that how do we celebrate it? And sometimes we celebrate it with music, or sometimes it's because of music that we're able to celebrate the moment. What Neil had to go through there and putting his feet on the floor, it was so incredibly inspirational. Writing a song like one little victory. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question necessarily.
No, you are.
It's incredibly, that was an incredibly dark, had to be an incredibly dark period for not only Neil, but for all of his loved ones.
As we see in the book.
Right.
This is something that the extended family, it's not the same, but they went through it together.
Yeah. They went through, it wasn't just him going through it. When I go through difficult periods, it's my loved ones who are there sharing the moments of triumph, like I said before, as well as the moments of solace. Again, I'm not sure that I answered that necessarily as you had asked it. Feel free to.
No, I think you did. I like when we wander into these little estuaries and, it's kind of what it's all about. But I guess getting back to the music and our specific avenue into the music through our love of this band, which endured for me. And, some people think I'm strange, but Rush was my first concert, and I saw them. My 40th was their final Buffalo show. I know you're smirking at me. 40.
No, 40 is to be celebrated. It's
more
absolutely
than most
to be
people.
Celebrated.
And again, it came to the point where, like, you're going to go see them again on this tour. I'm like, every chance that they're in the Northeast, I'm going. But that it never got old. And I find that pretty fascinating. And, it's kind of the way I feel about the Beatles too, and say Miles Davis and other things that I've loved for a long time. But this in particular never got old. And I think because it's music, and we could just talk about the harmonic construction of the music, if we wanted to. But they transcended that to become, for me, and tell me if you agree, a sort of beacon of what it meant to conduct yourself with integrity.
Oh, yes. With grace and integrity.
Grace and integrity, grace under pressure. All these things became huge lessons, and they were reflected in the music so that it really felt like a friend. Like, I don't know the guys personally. I've interviewed all of them at different times, met two of them. But, and I never blurred those lines of thinking, I know these guys, but I knew through the art, through the music, I did know them. We had a genuine relationship, where it was ongoing, where it was like getting a letter from a friend when a new record would come out. How has that endured for you over all this time? We both started a long time ago with this.
Yes. Okay. I like your comment when you said it never got old.
Yeah.
Okay. Here I am now in 2023, almost 2024. My passion for them has waned 0%. Now, part of the reason is it never got old. There they were in 2015 performing on their R40 tour, 41 years later after Neil having joined the band. And they still played with an incredible sense of urgency. Now you go see a young band perform and there's just this urgency coming off the stage. They know somebody from a record company might be there in the audience and this is their big chance.
They're playing for their lives.
Right. So they're playing with an incredible sense of urgency. And unfortunately, you can kind of recognize that when other bands of a different vintage are still playing. Sometimes, unfortunately, some of those bands lose that sense of urgency. But there's this band in 2015 on their 41-year anniversary still playing with incredible urgency, like this show is important. Now, at that point in their career, it wasn't important because they needed to, play for their lives. At that point, they were playing because of, that's who they are. They have great integrity for sure. And how do you not respect that in any person, let alone any musician? But they were playing knowing that this is the barometer that we have established for ourselves. But as their career continued on, they knew darn well, you and I know, that there were shows that we go to and all of a sudden parents were bringing their kids. And maybe these kids are seeing this band for the first time. And because of that, wasn't it was it Roger Maris or Joe DiMaggio who said something about he knew that when he went out on the field that night, there might be somebody there to see him play for the first time. And I need to play well for that person who might be seeing him play for the first time.
I love that.
Wasn't that the same thing with Rush?
I think Geddy would appreciate the baseball metaphors as well.
Indeed, yeah. But playing with that kind of urgency is something I respect. I respected that urgency at that point in their career. I completely and totally respected their integrity. I also respected their value for money. That in 2023, in the 2020s, we're paying a good dollar now to go to these shows. So I kind of wince a little bit when a band is saying thank you, good night after 70 minutes, and I've just plunked down almost $300. You're saying thank you, good night after 70 minutes? No, these guys gave us
70 minutes was the first set.
Yes, was the first. They gave us value for money.
Yeah.
They gave us their integrity. They inspired me to be more literate. They inspired me to be a part of this communion of not necessarily Rush fans, just of musicologists who want to sit and have these kind of conversations and say, hey man, let's just talk music.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Geddy's memoir,
Sure.
My Effin' Life. First of all, between my personal interest and just, the arc of my career, I don't know if there's a memoir by a musician or a biography of a musician that I haven't read. I've read hundreds and hundreds of these. I may be biased because my fandom is not something I try to be objective about. It just is what it is.
Yes.
This book is beautifully written. It is not ghost written. And it is one of the, I don't believe in the best. I don't like that word.
Lasting.
It is impactful. It is beautifully written, and it matters. It also makes you laugh. So it's weighty, it's significant, it's hilarious. And again, I feel that this book was approached the same way that this man has approached his own art musically. It matters, This isn't something that is less than what you would expect from the guy behind albums like 2112, Moving Pictures, Clockwork Angels, etc. I'd love to get your reaction to the book. I know that you did travel to see Geddy speak and read from the book. I'd like to hear about that experience. But let's start with, what did the book mean to you, and why did it matter to you?
Yeah, interesting that you noted some parts made you laugh.
Yeah.
That in his previous book, The Big Beautiful Book of Bass, even in that book is just aesthetically beautiful.
Yes.
But even in a beautiful book like that, Ged's voice still rang true.
Very much, even if he's just describing, not just describing.
Yeah.
For any listeners who might not know, the book details Geddy Lee's bass collection, which is not your average bass collection. It's incredibly thorough, incredibly detail-oriented, but also a hell of a lot of fun. So that's what Ray is referencing here, this book that details that collection and the acquisition of it.
And that's one thing I'll speak here just briefly as an educator. One thing that's difficult to teach young writers, the kids I deal with are fourth grade kids, they're 9 years old. It's difficult to teach a 9-year-old kid how to have voice in your writing. There's certain skills that are more easily taught. But when you read The Big Beautiful Book of Bass, you sensed this voice coming from the book that made it much more of an easier read than what a book of that genre would normally have been.
Yes.
So I wasn't surprised in reading this book. Of course, it's a different kind of book. Ged was able to still find the humor that is prevalent throughout The Big Beautiful Book of Bass. And in here, humor is a big part of why that band has stayed together. So in here, I was happy to see him representing himself as comedically as he did. Although I did also appreciate his own Geddy's own identification of inspiration, that him looking to his parents. I mean, I'm sure, anybody who has read the book, who's listening to this podcast, all we have to do is say, holy cow, what about chapter 3? Yeah. Excuse me. Incredible. But Ged looking at that as inspiration for him, I appreciated being able to tap into what inspired him. I did find it interesting that he didn't even know that his own father was a musician, right, until much later on. As he said, oh my God, it's in my effing genes.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was fascinating. Mm-hmm. And the chapter 3 of the book deals with the story of Geddy's parents, Holocaust survivors, mm-hmm. in some harrowing detail, mm-hmm. But really beautifully represented. And he prefaced that chapter, which in a way that I thought was very important, which was, if you want to skip this, go ahead. That's right. But here's why I think it's important that I do it. Mm-hmm. And he said, I think that people forget mm-hmm. Too easily, and they don't realize that fascism is always around the corner, mm-hmm. and we can't act like that's okay or that's normal. Mm-hmm. And then, this chapter was just beautifully handled, mm-hmm. But unflinching. Right. Did not try to spare the reader. Mm-hmm. I thought that was beautifully handled. And I also, it was returned to as a theme throughout the book, mm-hmm. and maybe a big part of the source of this man's personal ideas of integrity, mm-hmm. of living with grace under pressure. Mm-hmm. And
what a great gift for him as well to leave behind, 30 years from now, that he has left this behind for his children.
Important and his brave.
And his grandchildren. Yeah. To have this family legacy mm-hmm. left for them. I got to tell you, briefly, I thought, my God, it's a pretty good idea. Maybe I should do one of those. While my memory is still intact, while I still have all these great vivid memories before I lose them to time, I'd love to have my children and eventually, grandchildren I could leave these great stories with. Another something you're right, that was prevalent throughout the book, revisiting that, his parents' incredible experience, how you can find love. Isn't that right there? Isn't that testament to the power of love? Why love matters? That somehow in this incredibly horrific environment that they found themselves, Ged's parents, even in those circumstances, those horrific circumstances, they were still able to find love and chase love there. And then Ged also not as prevalent, but he mentioned his relationship, really was open about his relationship with his wife. Yeah. Now, that I've done a lot of writing.
Yeah. Album liner notes, scholarship, right, and parts of books, been featured in films on the band, all of this.
So I'm bringing this back to Ged's book, but in preparation for a lot of that work, I'll spend hours and hours and hours just going for, 8-mile walks listening to interviews. Mm-hmm. And when I say listening to interviews, that means me with my cassette Walkman listening to the interview that I taped whenever ago. Yeah. And there's one particular interview, I'd be lying if I said I knew exactly where it was from, but one particular interview in which somebody talked to Geddy about his relationship with his wife, and he said something like, marriage is the most difficult thing anybody could endure. And he said it lovingly, like it's the most difficult thing to maintain, whatever his verbiage was. He just gave a nod at that interview forever ago, just about how incredibly difficult it is to have a successful long marriage. Now, God has blessed me with a successful long marriage, but the fact that he was willing to open up as much as he was about that, one quote that I scribbled down where he said the band was silently running and occasionally ruining his life. I found that quite telling. That you and I, some people I've read, are upset that he didn't tell a little bit more about the creation of permanent waves, or tell me a little bit more about making Presto. Tell me a little bit more about making Tesfereco.
Yeah.
Some people would have wanted that, and I
certainly wouldn't turn it down.
Yeah.
But it's not as interesting as this.
Yeah, I'd love to know as much as I can about any of that. But when he was willing to open up as much as he was about how much the band was affecting his life and his marriage, all of a sudden that interview, that quote from that interview that I heard recently, all of a sudden meant more to me. Like, that's why he said that in that interview.
Yeah, and it is interesting that you quoted, we each pay a fabulous price for our visions of paradise from the Rush song Mission.
Right.
Well, there you go. I mean, as much as there's a price to pay to become this good and to really get this close to the flame of creativity,
I like that. The flame of creativity. It
can burn people around it. And he very much owned that the focus and intensity necessary to get that good and to maintain and be vigilant and protective of something so beautiful and important comes with a price, and that focus could be hurtful to people around him, even when the intention was not that. You're away so much if you're a musician. You need to focus so much on that art if it's going to be impactful and meaningful and lasting. It was very interesting to me. This was a side of him I haven't heard much about until this book. Kept it close,
I like the flame of creativity, by the way. With your permission, I'm going to use that out in public.
Yeah, royalties. You can make the check payable.
Yes. Yeah. But even it affected relationships within his own band.
Of course. I've been in these situations, and when you're trying to do something, you can become so focused on it that, the passion can edge the compassion out of the way a little bit, right? Because you're just like, I need to get this done and nothing matters but this.
That was well spoken as well. The passion can
I'm full from today, Ray.
Congratulations.
I might have a future in this, so we'll stick with it.
But
we'll see.
You read the book. A lot of your listeners, I'm sure, have read the book as well.
And if they haven't, I recommend they do. And I this is part of why I think it's worth talking about.
But his
you don't have to be a fan.
Right. That was another part. After reading the first X number of chapters, I said to my wife, I said, this book isn't necessarily just for Rush fans. If you want to read the first X number of chapters, it's there for you just as a great read.
Absolutely.
Because his relationships, he deals a lot with not only with his wife, or the relationship under the circumstances under which his parents began their relationship, but his relationship with Alex, and how there were a couple of times that Alex felt a little bit frustrated in the fact that Ged was willing to open those doors to all of us, or just in 2015, Ged not being happy about the ending of his band. But of course, once things happened with Neil shortly thereafter, he realized, how could I begrudge him that?
Yeah.
I can't begrudge anybody, by the way. I'll say this. I can't begrudge anybody at age 62 who wants to retire. No. In 2015, Neil was
especially
62.
Especially a drummer that's going to do.
Yes. And when I'm 62, I want to retire. I want to be retired as well. So the fact that he wanted to retire at 62, I understand, because I was thinking in 2015, well, yeah, I hope that I can retire when I'm 62. And Ged was just he's so incredibly driven. Of course, here we are in anticipation of 2024, or maybe it's now 2024 when people are listening to this, the 50-year anniversary. You'll be celebrating our 50 in 2024. And of course, there's rumors swirling about one thing or another.
Silly.
Well, Ged just continues to be creative.
Yeah.
Okay. The band retired in 2015, as you know. he needed to fill that creative void. And what did he do? He put out the big, beautiful book of bass. What did he follow that up with? His autobiography. What did he do thereafter? Well, he just created his new series, Our Bass Player's Human Too.
Yes.
There are people who want to retire, for, who deserve retirement and should enjoy a beautiful retirement, and people whose vision of retirement is, I want to just sit on the couch, I want to grow a long beard, I want to put on 50 pounds and eat Doritos all day long. Great. You probably earned it. Yeah, and you deserve it. But here's Geddy now at age 70, still feeling the need to create.
Yeah.
You still feel that he has that same urgency that we talked about previously. He has this same urgency to create. Now, is it going to be with his buddy Alex? Well, I know since 2015, I know Alex has appeared on numerous records by various artists.
Including
of course,
starting his own project, the Envy of None record.
And there's Envy of None with the great Andy Curran.
Yeah, our mutual friend.
Indeed, yeah. So there, that Envy of None was one of many. I have my beloved list here, and I've purchased so many records that Alex has played on post 2015. So the two of them still have this urgency to create.
There's a lesson in that, and that they've maintained their relationship and their proximity to that flame. They never didn't. That's a lesson to all of us that music in general can teach, but in particular, this band has certainly taught me and never let me down on that front.
Mm-hmm.
Part of my continued respect for them, and that's a deep well, has to do with the way that they dealt with the passing of, their beloved friend and bandmate. We all hear the noise in the, in the great social media wasteland. Everyone's got their idea. Get this drummer and keep going. I'm so glad they didn't. And to me, that was treating what they'd created with dignity, approaching it with integrity, the things that we've come to expect from them. But also treating the fans, I think, with respect and dignity, and approaching it with integrity. Because if they had come out and gotten some world famous, amazing drummer, there are certainly a lot of them out there. I'd pick Gavin Harrison, let's say, from Porcupine Tree, among other things. Fantastic drummer, friend of Neil's. I didn't want it to happen. I thought that the fact that they just didn't do it, in a way, it's like the same way that Geddy, as a young, 13, 14-year-old, when his father died, spent that year doing what was expected of a young, Jewish boy, and mourned his father. They really did that when Neil passed. And it helped me. And I think it helped other people. Even I didn't know this person. There's such a major thing in my life that you felt in your own fashion. You were mourning too. Didn't
this book maybe give you that kind of perspective?
Yes.
Knowing what Ged went through with the passing of his dad, knowing this is how we mourn.
Yeah, it helped me. And, my mother passed a year ago, and it's helped me mourn her in a healthy way. Because, again, it never fails to teach me things. All from falling in love with a stupid band from Canada.
Yeah. But I trust them so implicitly that here I am saying I didn't begrudge Neil his decision to retire. I said I want to retire when I'm 62.
He gave that more than enough.
Yes, but I trust them so implicitly that if we hear an announcement next year that they are going to play, and of course, as well as I, any drummer who's asked by Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, hey, we're thinking about doing this. Would you consider playing drums for us? Of course, that drummer's going to say, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's one of the most revered drum thrones in
Yes.
history of rock music.
I trust that if that day ever comes,
just don't call it Rush.
I'm not going to question the expertise of the guy or the girl sitting behind the drum kit. Obviously, him or her, that person is going to have enough chops. I'm not going to question that
You can't
whatsoever.
play music without it.
But I trust them so implicitly that I know that they would never put themselves in that position to be on stage with somebody else if they weren't 100% comfortable with that person. And if that person gave them the comfort of knowing that I am comfortable up on stage playing Free Will again. I'm comfortable to be on stage playing Subdivisions again. That this person has given us, thankfully we have that relationship with whoever that person might be, that we feel comfortable enough doing this. And I trust them so implicitly that if we do find ourselves, you and I, in an arena sometime in 2024 or 2025, seeing the two of them play on stage with a different drummer, they've never given me any reason throughout my life not to trust them.
Agreed. Feel the same way.
I respect them.
Yep.
I trust them.
They have every right to do it.
Yeah.
I know they would handle it right. And if they don't do it, I'm also completely comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I've gotten enough.
I'd be surprised if they didn't continue to create.
Yeah.
Because like I said, the both of them, after their period of mourning that was well spoken on your behalf there, on your part, after that period of mourning, they have continued to be very creative, not under the umbrella topic of Rush. There's Rush projects that are released, but the creation of new art has still been a part of their life.
Absolutely, yeah. That's never wavered.
Mm-hmm.
What about your experience? Well, which city did you travel to see Geddy? Was it Cleveland?
Cleveland, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Significant city for that band?
Indeed, yeah. And I understand that the format of each one of these appearances has been similar, but I appreciated Ged's. Ged does have a genuine appreciation for the fans, and his own need for connectivity. Yeah. Going back when My Favorite Headache was released in 2000, for your listeners, that's Geddy's solo album that he put out in 2000, correct? He went out and did a small, I would say, tour, some appearances at record stores. And his experience doing that, meeting a lot of fans and signing autographs and taking pictures, really left him indelibly stamped.
Yeah.
And he reflected upon that when he put out My Big Beautiful Book of Bass in 2018. He wanted to get back out there because that experience in 2000 was so positive. So Ged doing this book to promote My Effin' Life was positively predictable because he wants to get out there and connect with his fans. At the same time, it really put him in a position to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And I respected that, not only at the show that I attended, but I'm sure yourself, like a lot of your listeners, have watched so many clips online that it's inevitable at any one of these appearances that the topic of Neil would come up. Or, hey, Ged, can you tell us a little bit more about what your parents went through? You detailed in chapter 3. Difficult questions for him to answer if he's sitting on a couch with a family member, let alone sitting on a stage in front of a few thousand people. I respected his willingness to be so vulnerable in this situation. I think a lot of people saw a different side of Geddy in those appearances, not just, oh my God, man, that's Geddy Lee from Rush, man, that's the guy who does Tom Sawyer. No, you couldn't help but see this guy, this individual, and the fabulous price that he has paid to put himself in that position. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Mm-hmm. Who during this book tour, he's had different sort of co-hosts in each city that he visited. Among them have been Alex Lifeson, his best friend of more than 50 years, and bandmate. Who was on stage in Cleveland?
Donna Halper was out for the second half of the show. And
who was the WMMS DJ who first played Working Man.
Correct. Mm-hmm. His best friend of 50 years. And think about that union. Think about that communion.
Yeah.
And where was that born out of? It was born out of the premise of your show here.
Yeah.
Because music matters. Here are these guys who've enjoyed a beautiful, fulfilling friendship for all these years because music matters. I'm appreciative of here and now. I'm so thankful to be here with you. I'm so thankful to have you in my life. And why are we here together? Because music matters. Yeah. In this case, their music particularly mattered to us. But there's a great example of why music matters, because it could just bring you these beautiful, healthy relationships
that endure.
Yeah, that are there for each other in times of triumph as well as in times of solace.
I think that beautifully takes us back to where we started. Mm-hmm. And for any listeners who maybe find this a little too inside baseball, so to speak, and why Rush, mm-hmm. The group to which you and I have claimed lifelong membership mm-hmm. proudly mm-hmm. is sometimes looked at by people who are not in that group as like, oh, what a bunch of dorks. Mm-hmm. That's fine. Mm-hmm. I think that's funny. Mm-hmm. I think the band thought it was funny too.
Yes. Yeah.
But let's flip it before we wrap up. Mm-hmm. Why does Rush matter? Well, I think we've tried to get into that because this particular band, for us, there have been others, and there are others for other people. Mm-hmm. But this one taught us an awful lot mm-hmm. And helped us choose our armor and sword, right? To kind of define who we wanted to be as we've gone through our life. And, to have been this into something this long mm-hmm. and it didn't get old. Mm-hmm. Is unusual, I mean, the kind of fandom that you and I have made a lifelong habit. A lot of people do that for a while. Life becomes more serious in other ways. Mm-hmm. They abandon it. You know mm-hmm. what I mean?
Which is the last thing you should do. Which is the last thing you should do when life is becoming difficult.
It's not what I believe in, and it's something I learned from Rush.
To those people,
right? Hold your fire, keep it burning bright.
Yes.
And it wasn't just early on that these lessons were important. They became incredibly more important later mm-hmm. as you start, myself starting to lose loved ones. Mm-hmm. My mother, some very close friends, longtime musical compatriots, mm-hmm. My career, in mm-hmm. a sense, mm-hmm. Needed to be reinvented. They were, there for me through all of it. Mm-hmm. And that's a really incredible gift. Again, I'm not saying music is the only place you can find that, mm-hmm. but I can only speak to my own experience. And for me, it's just been invaluable. And I thank them for so much of it.
For that gift.
And that gift,
that
and
leading
me to an open-mindedness that has let so much other music, art, experience, mm-hmm. philosophy come in, mm-hmm.
It is lifelong. It is lifelong, and it is a gift. Sometimes you'll hear people refer to their, a band or an artist's legacy or an athlete's legacy. There are lyrics of theirs that you and I can, recite easily that all of a sudden became infinitely more poignant mm-hmm. when our nation was going through political turmoil X number of years ago, that all of a sudden the lyrics to the title track to A Farewell to Kings meant something different. The lyrics to a song that we've heard a billion times, like Closer to the Heart, all of a sudden meant something different. And isn't that another great thing about music is there is no political affiliation. Your political affiliation is put aside, and all I know is I'm a Rush fan and you're a Rush fan. I'm a music fan and you're a music fan. Music does matter, Jeff.
Music
you
matters,
know as well
right?
as I.
Ray Wawrzyniak, it's always a pleasure to spend time with you, to talk about the things that we love, mm-hmm. and to hear your own take on why music matters, has mattered, and continues to.
Music matters to me. You matter to me. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here. Continued good good health to you, continued success with your podcast. Everybody, music does matter.
Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank
My
you.
pleasure.